Aisea, what would you say have been the main changes that have taken place in Rotuma since 1970 when Fiji became independent?
I see. When you say main changes, the word change is very broad. Can you narrow it down to specifics?
Well, how about the main changes from the standpoint of, for example, the political situation in Rotuma? How has that changed?
I see. Now, I will say that people are becoming more and more aware of their political rights. For instance, the last 2 years, the people of Rotuma district asserted these rights and replaced their chief. Now that's something very rare. And at the moment, of course, you have a political wrangling at Oinafa, where the chiefly factions are fighting for the headship of that district. I think that is because you have a more and more educated population now than we had 30 years ago. You remember the time you were here? 1960.
Yes.
Well, after 30 years, that's another generation. Well, that's as far as politics is concerned. At the district level and the village level, majority rule is being adhered to instead of the old system of the chief saying this and that's that. Now that's what I can see.
Politically. How about economically? Some people seem to have a lot more money available to them now than others. Do you think that the money that's available to people, the greater increase in money, for example, coming from overseas, has had an effect on life in Rotuma?
Certainly. Whenever you have the money economy, that is going to govern to a great extent our lives. There's a conflict there between traditional values and I think money values. Traditional values are based on concepts which we have been practicing for generations. Now money values, it's a very new concept here. Money is power, of course. And people are beginning to realize that if you are not a chief, and if you have plenty of money, you are a chief in a way. I think that is something that people are beginning to realize. Money is power. And to pursue that power, many Rotumans have gone overseas. I think the process of transmigration will be accelerated. Because if you live here, well, you can't make it money. This is a small place. So many Rotumans send their children and young men to Fiji. Now, many of these young men go on and become sailors in overseas shipping companies, which pay very well, especially the oil companies, where they pay at least $50 a day when the ship is loaded. $1,500 a month. That's money undreamt of, let's say, 30 years ago. Then, of course, when the money comes here through remittances, the people tend to become more and more sophisticated in their tastes and in their outlooks. Whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not sure.
Do you
Depends
think,
on the viewpoint.
right, do you think it affects the relationships between families? For example, suppose you have living among relatives and some have a lot more money available than others. Does that affect the relationship between the families?
Certainly, certainly. You see, the traditional values of sharing can be adversely affected by some having some money and others having no money. Now, the Christian concept of sharing and the money concept of having more money are conflicting interests that we are now facing. There are people who share. Traditional wealth can be easily shared. Things like match and my chicken there. But not so with cash. I think cash is very difficult to share.
So do you think that there are some problems that have been developing between relatives because of this?
The possibility is there. You know, trying to keep up with the Joneses. Those who have not can become envious.
Good. What would you say are the best things about living on Rotuma at this time?
At this time? Well, I should think that life is still slow. Nothing of the rat race that you have in the cities and urban areas. The people can still do their own thing. I think they can still do their own thing. They still have a free life, a lot of liberty. I think all the human rights mentioned by the United Nations, I think these people here, they have it. And they can always call upon their friends overseas, their relatives overseas, to send them money. Matter of fact, this island is living on borrowed money or lent money from overseas, from their friends. See, the product of this island is copra. That's the main one. They earn about 200,000. But the Rotuma co-ops make sales of about $1.5 million. Now the balance of that comes from overseas. So if I say that we are living on charity, I may be expressing a fact which the Rotuma people won't like to hear.
So freedom, personal rights, and so forth are some of the best things about life in Rotuma. Are there any other things about living in Rotuma that you find particularly satisfying?
Well, as a Rotuman, I have hundreds of friends. I probably am known to nearly everyone on this island. We haven't got any burglars. You sleep with the house open. You want to go to another place, you just leave the house. Well, I think that is something that you don't have in urban areas. You know the next door neighbor, and you know the whole people in the village, and the next village. I think friendliness is one great gift we still have.
What would you say are some of the most difficult things about living on Rotuma, or the worst things about living in Rotuma nowadays?
Well, I should think, from an economic point of view, is the position of this island. If you look at the map, you find Rotuma in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, at least 200 to 300 miles from anywhere. Now that is one of our biggest problems. We are out of the way. All goods must come from about 300, 400 miles away. Transport cost in the world today is going up very quickly. Now that is one. Another one that I can see is the parents' expectation of the children's future achievement. It appeared to me that everyone was hoping that his child would end up with a white-collar job. And because of that, the flow of people to urban areas will be accelerated. See, at the moment, we have asked government to take over the high school, to upgrade it so that it is just as good as any other high school in Fiji. That is in an effort to stem the flow of Rotumans to urban areas, mainland Fiji. But that remains to be seen. At the 10th year, students start leaving. That's my high school. About 30 years ago, there were more than 3,000 people here. That's when the school started. But after that, there were 2 points of outlet from Rotuma. One is that after Form 4, that's the 10th year of schooling, students leave. And they either drop out or get a job in Fiji and stay there. Then they invite their parents to come over and live with them. The extended family started moving out. Today, you have 2,000, maybe 300, 400. Not because the Rotumans are not getting more children. There was a time then when our birth rate was the highest in the country. But the population here keeps falling because of this moving out.
Are there any other problems that you see as particularly in need of solution at this time in Rotuma?
From an administrative point of view, I think we have a big problem. What I might call the adaptation of the chiefly system to present conditions. Now, in Fiji, they have a chiefly system there. But I believe that in most areas, the chief is not an executive officer. Now, the system in Rotuma is somewhat like your system in the United States, when the president, the head of state, and chief executive. 2 things. Now, in other British countries, you have a head of state and a prime minister. Now, our old chiefly system is somewhat like that. He is the chief and also the chief executive. Now, I think that if you supervise the job, you are the boss, and the job doesn't go well, you are to be blamed. But then, who should blame the chief? I believe that the solution might be that our chiefs should change their attitude and delegate all their executive powers. Be a chief like the lords in UK and the Queen. You just be there. All the executive power and all other powers are given to the people. So if they don't do it well, you can turn around and say, hey, come on. But if you have to do the job yourself and fail, who is going to tell you that? I think that is one of our main problems here.
What do you think are the best solutions to these problems? What would you propose, what path would you propose for Rotuma to follow to try to solve these problems?
One would be to have a chief elected every 5 years. Now if he's good, well, I will stick to you. And give you 2 terms, maybe 3, and limit it there, and retire you. Somewhat like the US president. You have 2 terms now, unlike the time of Roosevelt.
Yes.
That is one way. You know, our chiefly system, we hold these things in turns. One branch of the family hold it, and then the next one, it is your turn. One other thing, I think our chiefs must remember one thing. It is common language here to say, my people, uttered by a chief. Well, the other side of the coin is, the people can say, that is our chief. See, the chief can say, these are my people. People can say, he is our chief. Meaning that without the people, there will be no chief. Now many chiefs tend to forget the other side of the coin, that I belong to them. I don't know whether you understand what I mean. Yeah. If you are our chief, as far as I'm concerned, we can replace you anytime. That's how I look at it. Because our Rotuman fashion demands that a person becomes a chief after he has been selected or elected by the clan. As far as I know, there is no born chief. You may be a member of a chiefly clan, but you become a chief when the clan says, okay, we will install you. And if they give it to you, well, I think they have every right to withdraw it once you prove, or once your credibility has vanished. I think that's one problem.
Is there anything else that you would like to comment on with regard to the state of Rotuma today and the transition it is making?
Some years ago, there was a move for this place to be independent. I think the Milmahal clan. I don't blame these people. I have an open mind. I know many people like that. In 1987, we went to Fiji to the Great Council of Chiefs, and then we called a Rotuma community meeting. And the sentiment was expressed by many of the speakers. And I said to them, look, you have every right to your opinions, You have every right to your opinions and every right to express them. But it would be wise to talk about independence if you actually live on Rotuma. I mean, as far as I can see, it would be silly if you live in Fiji and advocate your island Rotuma to be independent. There are certain ways of doing it. You know, the Milmahau clan went in a rather forceful way. The easiest thing is for the council to say to the Great Council of Chiefs in Fiji, please prepare us for independence. And I'm certain they would agree. But no clan, no matter how big or small, can talk about this for the whole of the island. The organization of clans will disrupt our present administration. For instance, a clan might have some people living in this village, some in that village, some in the other village, right through Rotuma. Now, how can you exist in a society where next door people are not working with you in our communal village work? See, at the moment, I have heard that the religious sect at Kalwaka are not cooperating with the people of Natal in their communal work, such as cleaning their bush roads and all that. They say it is against their religious precepts.
Jehovah's Witness?
I think that's Jehovah's Witness. Well, that is something that we will have to watch out for. That because you live in this village and because you are a Jehovah's Witness, you are not going to help your friends in communal work such as cleaning the roads and all that. Well, I think with those comments, I think I have mentioned some of the problems that we have.
Do you think it is feasible for Rotuma to be independent?
Yes, that is a big question. People say if Tuvalu can make it, we can make it. You know what Tuvalu is like. Some atolls right around there. And I believe that given proper thought without hurrying anything, I think it would be viable. I think once our Rotuman people know, I mean those who live not on the island, I think many of them would be very big. But that will take some time and some planning. Such an event should not be rushed. That's my view of it.
Thank you very much, Aisea. That was a lovely interview.